you are and whenever you are. Welcome, good souls of the planet and beyond, to Paranormal Now. I'm your host, Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Tonight's first hour guest is Alejandro Rojas of OpenMinds.tv to discuss the latest happenings in the world of ufology, an exciting time where congressional members of Congress are pushing for, I guess, what I would call light disclosure. And in the second hour, we are graced with a great source of spiritual know-how, a hacker of this matrix reality we live in, Sonia Barrett, author of The Holographic Canvas, A Journey of Possibilities, and radio host of The Expansion Zone. All right, so share your thoughts and experiences with us during or after the show on Facebook.com/ParanormalNowRadio, on Instagram @ParanormalNow, Twitter @Paranormal_Now, and of course in the KGRA chat room to pose your questions for our guests tonight. We might have a slight technical happening with the phone lines, so we may not have the phone lines tonight. I'll keep you posted to see how that goes. Share your thoughts again if you wish, and your questions on Instagram. I'll try to check there as well, just in case I miss anything in the chat room. Okay, so now before we bring on Alejandro, I'm going to read for you now. This is the letter from Representative Mark Walker to the Secretary of the Navy, Richard Spencer, dated July 16th, 2019. Secretary Spencer, in recent days, members of Congress and the public have seen press reports regarding unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, engaging with or encountering our naval aviators. The reports mention the existence of these encounters both domestically and abroad during various missions and trainings. We have also seen statements made by the Department of Defense regarding steps taken by the Navy to draft new guidelines for aviators to report these occurrences. Now, additionally, there have been reports of significant investments in advanced aerospace technologies, like the recorded UAP encounters by China. Based on pilot accounts, encounters with these UAPs often involved complex flight patterns and advanced maneuvering which demand extreme advances in quantum mechanics, nuclear science, electromagnetics, and thermodynamics. Mind you, this is coming from a congressman. If the accounts are true, the unidentified crafts could pose a serious security risk to our military personnel and defense apparatus. They could also represent a tremendous opportunity for advancements in science and technology that can contribute to the public good. The detailed news of the encounters come on the heels of an announcement by the Department of Defense in 2017 that noted the end of the Advanced Aerospace Threat and Identification Program, otherwise known as ATIP, which was tasked with investigating UAP encounters. As a member of the House Committee on Homeland Security and the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Intelligence and Counterterrorism, these reports are concerning from a national airspace and domestic security perspective. While I am encouraged by the Navy's proactive decision to draft new guidelines for reporting, I am concerned these reports are not being fully investigated and understood. Since the decision to end the ATIP, has the department continued to both log reports, sightings, and fully investigate the origins of the accounts? Does the department continue to dedicate resources to tracking and investigating the claims? If so, to what measure? Has the department found physical evidence of otherwise that substantiates these claims? Lastly, does the department have any information regarding private companies or foreign nations who have made significant advancements in aerophysics? We believe the answer to these questions are vital to our national security and scientific research and of significant public interest. Thank you for your immediate attention to this matter. We look forward to working with you on this important matter to ensure our domestic security. Mark Walker. There is no question in my mind that the frequency of important figureheads, whether they're recently retired or in office, showing a much more poignant interest in what's happening with these UFO or UAP incidents. Now, for a long time, we've had people who have been retired for years or decades. They come out of the closet, as it were, and they share their stories, and they're all but forgotten, or ignored by the mainstream media. Here and now, starting in 2017, we are noticing a trend. And I'm curious to get Alejandro's opinion on that. Where does he think this is going? Is it taking us anywhere? Alejandro Rojas is a radio host for Open Minds Radio, editor and contributing writer for Open Minds Magazine, as well as openminds.tv. For several years, Alejandro was the official spokesperson for the Mutual UFO Network as the director of public education and has blogged for the Huffington Post. As a UFO paranormal researcher and journalist, Alejandro has spent many hours in the field investigating phenomena up close and personal, and moreover, he certainly knows his stuff. Alejandro, welcome.
Hello, thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on. So I would like to get right to it and get your take on what is happening. Why is there this push by Congress people who in the past would have never put their names on paper in regard to a subject like this?
Mm-hmm. I think it's an incredible happening. Really, we haven't had something like this happen before. And what is this? What is the thing that's happened? Is that we've had, Lou Elizondo, who worked in the Pentagon investigating UFOs, come out and say, hey, I've been doing this. Now, I asked him in the past, if he considers himself a whistleblower, and he says no. But in a way he is, because he's sharing information that wasn't intended necessarily to be public, nor was it necessarily officially sanctioned to be public. I mean, what we've seen is the DOD Public Affairs Department push back against him quite a bit because this didn't come from them. It came from Lou himself. And he came out, he essentially felt just like the senator that you talked about. He felt like, there are credible cases. These events are occurring. We need to investigate these things and take them seriously. Really, if you look closely to the background, he brought this up the chain of command. He tried to take this to his friend and superior, the Secretary of Defense Mattis at the time. He couldn't get a meeting with Mattis on this. They didn't want to share this with him. Is it because they were keeping secrets? Not necessarily. It was more along the lines of kind of plausible deniability. But, if the media catches wind that Mattis is having UFO meetings, then, of course, they're going to ask him about it. So so he wasn't able to get those meetings to really get this taken up the chain of command. We've learned that Chris Mellon, who was an assistant with Secretary of Defense of Intelligence, in the Clinton and Bush administrations, obviously someone with a lot of pull, he attempted, and they probably thought, hey, we're going to be able to get this. I'll help you, make this happen. But he couldn't do it either. And so it appears that, he felt at this point that his best method would be to go to resign and take this to the public straightforward. And luckily, Tom DeLonge essentially was working on creating this to the stars with a lot of the former people who worked with Bigelow Aerospace who were contracted for ATIP. It created this space for Lou to continue to work with his colleagues or these people he had been working with, and with Tom and some of the credibility of the others, get attention from the media, and that attention they certainly got. And we haven't had someone. I mean, the military said that they have not investigated any of this officially since 1969, but that turned out not to be the case. And so here we have, for the first time since 1969, someone who's officially investigated this stuff.
And for those who are listening and may not have a context, Luis Elizondo is a former employee of office of the Undersecretary of Defense Intelligence. And Chris Mellon was the Assistant Secretary, Defense for Intelligence. So these are both people who have had the credentials. Now, why were people up in arms about Luis Elizondo's credentials in the first place?
Which people in particular?
Well, I'm not going to name call, but we'll just say.
Oh yeah, I guess which groups of people?
well, I mean, in like question, the UFO actually, community? The UFO community, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yep.
Well, the UFO community is suspicious. There are a lot that are conspiratorial minded, and not that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's always good to be skeptical and to check, to make sure that everything's verified. Mm-hmm. And I think it was mainly because some of them wanted official documentation to verify all of this. And slowly we have gotten some of that. But what's kind of funny as a journalist and looking at the mainstream journalists who have covered this, they haven't needed that because, the New York Times essentially vetted him when they wrote the story that made this a big story back in 2017, December 2017. And, so they were able to, obviously, if the Department of Defense is not willing to share much about all of this, we're not going to get much from them. Luckily, we had others that we could go to. Chris Mellon, of course, is a very credible person. We also had the people who worked. We do know that, Bigelow Aerospace was contracted to work on this UFO program. And people inside of Bigelow Aerospace, the contractors were willing to come out and say, yes, we worked with Lou Elizondo. Harry Reid, the senator who got the funding for the project, was able to come out and say, yes, this program was real. Lou was telling the truth, and, he worked on this program. So we had all of the people you would go to verify this, verified that it was real. So the New York Times had an abundance of sources to verify that what Lou was telling them was legit. The only piece of it wasn't really Lou's position that the New York Times story was not definitive on. The one thing that was not definitive was if ATIP continued to this day, because the DoD said funding and the program ended in 2012, and Lou said no, the program continues to this day. That part is still one of the things that the media is honestly struggling with, and often the mainstream media quotes the 2012 date as opposed to, and we don't have anything official beyond Lou's word that it does continue to this day. Personally, actually, I've seen documents, and I know others have, that show that it does continue to this day. But until we have someone coming out to state that, that'll still kind of be in question. However, what has been good, especially for Lou, is that he has been accurate with what he's been claiming since. Even though the DoD in the New York Times and in other places has questioned or even contradicted some of his claims, such as the FLIR videos being released by the DoD. They denied that at first, but then a document came out and they verified, showing that they did indeed release them, and they verified that document was real. That's an example and there have been other examples where he is proven to be accurate. So his credibility is really high for those reasons.
If you're keeping score, U.S. government versus Luis Elizondo.
Exactly. And a lot of people kind of don't, and I think conveniently a lot of the people don't frame it the way you just did. But certainly that is what we have seen. There has been this back and forth. And there has been just that exactly what you're saying, the DoD versus Lou Elizondo. It's not, the DoD secretly working with Lou Elizondo. In fact, it's more along the lines, it's apparent that they have not been pleased with, him sharing this information they were not ready to share.
Well, I mean, we sort of have to trust the government to a certain extent, but we know not to believe everything that they say. Mm-hmm. And especially in the world of ufology, like you said, they've contradicted themselves so many times.
Right.
Even their explanations for the Roswell crash, that narrative changed as more evidence came out. So I think we're all seasoned enough to expect that. Now, To the Stars Academy itself, I guess you can say that they're really the driving force right behind the mainstream awareness of this. But I wondered, do you really think that they did that much more work than anyone else, or was it rather just a timing coincidence, branding?
I think that it is more coincidence. I mean, certainly there are a lot of UFO researchers who have done an incredible amount of work. And I think, certainly there's a level of frustration among those researchers, especially when Tom DeLonge first announced his organization. When he first announced it, even prior to that, when he was claiming that he was working with high-level government insiders. And nobody really was sure if he was telling the truth. There was a lot of skepticism on all fronts regarding that. Mm-hmm. But then John Podesta's emails were leaked through WikiLeaks, and John Podesta was the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And we found out, that in his emails, John Podesta was working with Tom DeLonge, and they were organizing these meetings with important people. The guy who was in charge of the research labs at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is where Blue Book was housed. And it's where the Foreign Technology Division exists. The exact group who would examine UFOs. And in fact, Tom made that point in one of those emails. He said, this is where they took the Roswell crash. Another gentleman who was who was the assistant to the guy in charge of Air Force Space Command, a gentleman who was working for Lockheed Martin Skunk Works and as an executive. And Lockheed Martin Skunk Works are the people who built Area 51 at the behest of CIA and developed the top cutting edge black projects out there at Area 51. So these are some really high level people. At the UFO Congress a couple of years ago, we gave Tom DeLonge an award for being able to get these conversations going at a level that has never happened before. Especially a civilian getting these conversations going in the U.S. Those conversations obviously bore fruit because he was able to then, create To the Stars with this group of high-level officials, some of them colleagues with some of these other people that we mentioned earlier. So did he work harder than anybody else? Maybe not, but he certainly worked harder than any celebrity has before. And there's been a lot of celebrities interested in this. And his celebrity certainly was able to open a lot of doors, and probably, and certainly him having, a lot of money was also able to help him get the resources to do a lot of this, just like it helped Robert Bigelow, who, is a millionaire who runs Bigelow Aerospace and does all this, and also, did paranormal research and all of that. So he had some advantages, no doubt, but there's also no doubt he put in the work. He put his reputation on the line. He took a lot of heat in the media that made fun of him over all of this. And in fact, they still do to some degree. So I think we still owe him a lot of credit, even though, like you're saying, it doesn't take away from the hard work that, let's say, Stanton Friedman, who spent his entire life working on this, or many other UFO researchers out there who have spent, a lot of time working on all of this.
Well, what I would say is, actually, you mentioned WikiLeaks, and I thought, it really is funny how our opinion of WikiLeaks changes depending upon what they release. It's interesting how the community can wax and wane and support or turn against people, and it's not easy to stand from the outside. Because, I don't know you personally. I don't know so many other people personally. I don't know Tom DeLonge personally. So you're looking from the outside and you're kind of seeing how people behave, right? You're seeing the blog posts, the articles, the interviews, and you're trying to get a sense of, are they sincere? Where are they going with this? Are they keeping something from us? Or are they just being good ufologists and just doing the best that they can and maybe making mistakes along the way? There's no way for us to really know. Unless someone is just caught red-handed doing something, utterly, dishonest. Tom DeLonge, when you're producing anything, you're putting a business together, right? And he wanted To the Stars Academy to be a business venture and an investigative venture as well. And when you're doing anything like that, anyone who knows when you're developing a documentary, for instance, it does not go the way you think it's going to go. And so you can put yourself out there and say, this is what we're doing. We'll be ready by this time. and then it doesn't happen. Money doesn't happen, or life happens, gets in the way, and then you delay. In the meantime, you have a bunch of people blogging online and saying terrible things about you, that you're a liar, that you're full of it. And I think that that's a shame. And I think we really need to take a step back and breathe and not judge each other so harshly. Constructive criticism is good, but the problem I always hear in the ufological community is that everybody's at each other's throats. But I feel like when people say that, they go after each other's throats anyway. So there's a bit of a contradiction there. I don't know if that's your experience or not.
No, I think you're right that there is a lot of hypocrisy, unfortunately, that, the same people are in one breath. It's like everybody's attacking one another, and then they go on and attack one another. And I think that, a lot of people feel very, passionate about this topic. And often they feel passionate about their own worldview around this topic. And it's difficult to be in the, enigma, or if things aren't clear, it's difficult to live that way. But I think that it's important to be there. I mean, it's important to think, okay, and to realize I don't know as much as I can, or I don't know much about what's going on, no matter how interested I am in all of this. But to be okay with that, because it is okay not to know. And that's the whole point of us taking a journey to try to figure it out together, and do research. And that's exactly what's happening. So we're all human. And I think you mentioned earlier, I've spent a lot of time with a lot of the people involved. In fact, I've followed Bigelow. I've known a lot of the players with Bigelow Aerospace, who were kind of the predecessor in a way to the Stars. I think you can argue that. And, these are people who are trying their best to research all of this and to figure it out. And they do screw up here and there. They don't, always do the right thing. And a lot of people get upset, or, maybe they even cause problems here and there. But you know what? None of us are perfect, and we all stumble and don't always do the right thing, but we're trying. And I think that's what really To the Stars is doing, that they're doing their best to, but
do you think they could be doing better?
Well, everybody can always be doing better. However, I think what we have to do is also stop and take a look at the fruits of their efforts thus far. And they're extraordinary. The letter that you read before you brought me on is a direct result of what they've been doing. The Navy creating UFO guidelines is a direct result. Us knowing about and having these Navy jet fighter pilots coming out and talking about their experiences, that's a direct result. The level of credibility that this topic has right now, and the prevalence of serious discussion in the media, in Washington, D.C., and even in the White House.
Alejandro, let's hold it right there. I hate to cut you off, but we're right at the break. But yes, we will come back. I want to get Alejandro's take on why people are a little bit different now. What's going on? Aside from To the Stars Academy's work, why are we, the people, so responsive and excited about this subject that it's actually getting into our governmental institutions? Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now. We'll be right back after this break, and we will, good news, be able to take your phone calls. See you on the other side.
See Hi, this is AJ, and I would love to invite you to tune into my show, Soul Wanderings, every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, where we visit with a new guest each week about their authentic journey through this human experience. So come wander with us Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, with Soul Wanderings, exclusively on KGRAradio.com.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
Hi, Matt Ray with America's First News here, and I have great news for those of you who suffer with debilitating migraine headaches, maybe a loved one or your child does. MigraLief, the nutritional migraine supplement everyone's talking about, now can be found at the vitamin shop stores nationwide and Meijer in the Midwest. For almost 2 decades, hundreds of thousands of migraine sufferers have benefited from MigraLief, and thousands of neurologists and headache specialists recommend it. Why is it popular? It's drug-free and addresses the specific nutritional needs of adults and children who suffer migraines. What's even better, MigraLief comes in a formula you can take daily and one on the spot as needed. So if you get migraines, get your life back on track. Go to MIG911.com. That's MIG and the numbers 911.com. That's also where you can read the testimonials. Or head on over to your local vitamin shop store nationwide or Meijer in the Midwest. If you get migraines, do yourself a favor. Change your life with MigraLief.
Where will you be this September 13th through the 15th if you are a critical thinker seeking answers to questions like, what are aliens? Are they demons or visitors from other worlds? Do they have an agenda? And if so, how do we stop them from interfering in our lives? Then the place you need to be is Branson, Missouri, inside the Mansion Theater, as Gen 6 Productions presents The True Legends Answering the Alien Question Conference 2019, featuring writer, explorer, and filmmaker Timothy Alberino, author, lecturer, and filmmaker L.A. Marzulli. Is our planet being prepared for reseeding by non-Earth entities? Find out from publisher Mike Adams, UFO investigator Chase Kletzky, investigative reporter George Knapp, world-renowned researcher and author Steve Quayle, and many more. Reserve your seats or order live streaming now at gen6.com.
Your contact for current news and trending topics. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. I'm your grateful host, Alan B. Smith on KGRA Radio. Taking us out of the break was music by Septembrio. If you want to find out more about Septembrio, They are good people with great music. You can go to septembrio.com. Just super cool people. Thanks to Michael for allowing us to use your music every week or so. Okay, so we are with Alejandro Rojas. Alejandro, I do want to get your opinion on why you think they're, aside from the great branding by To the Stars Academy and their marketing work to get this information out there, besides that, why are there people, why are there professionals in the military, in Congress, in the science world, like Steve Justice from Skunkworks? Why are they so proactive and interested and willing to open up and talk about this?
Well, I think that what a lot of people also miss is that there is this great history with these group of people. So, for instance, like I mentioned, Bob Bigelow. Bob Bigelow has had an interest in UFOs since he was a child, but it was the late 80s, 90s that he really started getting involved. A lot of people don't realize he really was the inspiration and started Coast to Coast. He convinced Art Bell to do a show and funded that and got that rolling. He then created an organization, and that's when he started collecting and hiring scientists to work in all of this stuff. Some of those being people such as Harold or Hal Puthoff, who since the 70s was working in the government, and getting funding on paranormal projects. John Alexander, who also worked on paranormal projects inside of the Army. So it was a group of scientists that were already there, and these people have been working for decades. Eric Davis, some of the names that you hear with To the Stars, these guys have been working for decades in this arena and talking with colleagues, working with colleagues. Some of these individuals in the military have created these large networks of people who, of course, have gone up in the ranks as time has gone on and remained interested in this topic. So these are kind of the guys who have been out there interested that we just didn't know were there and kind of have been in the closet, too afraid to kind of come forward. Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole rich history here that is just continuing. And we didn't even know that they all began working with the DOD and Lou Elizondo. Lou Elizondo has been working with these guys for like nearly 10 years, and we've been working with these guys as other people interested in UFOs and the topics. And we didn't even know Lou was out there until he resigned and became public, even though some of these people had been working with them, but keeping that end of things secret. So, all of this, this is kind of a network of people that has been fostered over the years. And now they're more willing to come out. Luckily, due to Tom's efforts, but also, Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and Hal Puthoff and some of these people who have been brave enough to put their careers on the line and their credibility on the line to publicly discuss their interest in all of this. Now that these others have come out of the woodwork and said, I'm willing to put my name on the list. I'm more willing to get out here and be bold and work with you all. And that's really, I think, what's happened. This is a rich, long history. It's not something that's happened new. The only new thing is this young guy, Tom, with all this money coming in with his, fan base, essentially saying, hey, I can get to the youth, something you all have wanted to do. And, I want to throw my hat in and get involved. And people have been willing to do that. Tom may seem like a goofball. I think he may come across like that to many. But he's actually a really intelligent and nice person. We've worked with him for a long time with Open Minds, actually. He reprinted some of our stories for his Strange Times articles, and we've worked with him on a couple efforts in the past. And, he's always been great to work with.
I'm glad that he is there and he is making a difference in this world in this regard. I think that people are not afraid to talk about it in general. People just walking down the street and having conversations. It's not like it used to be like, oh, that's the crazy uncle, It's it's okay. And even if they don't believe in you in what you're saying, if they don't think that the UFO phenomena is a legitimate phenomena, people are a little bit more arresting in their commentary on it. And they're not as harsh or critical on other people, and they just kind of like shake your head and nod, or say, okay, I don't believe, but I'm interested. I'll hear what you have to say. And I think that's what's changing the tides, because the media as well has been sort of the manipulator of the narrative. And just like anything else, right? Like a politician's constituents, when enough of your constituents start asking about something and expect something of you, and you don't fulfill that duty, you're going to lose your job. And I think that's what's happening with the media too. The public is so interested in this, such a wide breadth of fascination, that the mainstream media is having a hard time making fun of it without getting negative feedback from their constituents, as it were. So everyone listening, the open lines are open. 85-KGRA live. That's 855-472-5483. And those lines are brought to you by the Paranormal Radio app. So if you want to ask Alejandro your questions, now is the time to do it. Alejandro, what do you think about the supposed leak that Richard Dolan has spoken so much on lately, the Eric Davis documents and the Admiral Wilson documents?
Yeah, these are documents that have been rumored to exist for many, many years. Especially Grant Cameron has referred to them. I think, Richard has in the past as well. And now that apparently it was, they were found in Edgar Mitchell's records and have been then released. The problem is you can't really do much with them. They're hearsay, and especially with the so-called Wilson document, Wilson himself and the other guy in the document, I can't remember his name right now, they have both denied that conversation's true or that even happened. So what can you do with it? If they're denying that, there's nothing you can do with it. Lots of the references are of dubious, items that have either been, I feel, debunked or at least are nothing that we can even look into. Mm-hmm. I think that it's detrimental to this field to make a big deal about those documents. Even if you believe they're real, they might be able to lead you down a path where you can discover some really great things and reveal those. And I think that is the best thing with these documents, that they're tools to help your research. But, we're not going to get anywhere if we're going to the public and saying, hey, look, we have these documents. Sure, the people in the documents referenced in the documents are saying they're not real, but even John Alexander, he brings up a host of great points that speak to the reasons these documents aren't credible, such as some of the email addresses that are referenced or locations that are referenced. You can do research on, and those people either weren't there at the time or those are not their real addresses. So there are a lot of problems, too many problems with the documents to take them at face value or even to really convince anybody of anything. Now, this is my perspective as a journalist, where it's my job to bring credible information forward. But as a researcher, I think they're interesting things to read and be aware of, and to check into all of those different items that are mentioned, because maybe one of those will bear fruit. But
in these documents, U.S. Navy Wilson was the director of Defense Intelligence, and at one point he references MJ-12, and that's a bombshell, right? If that were absolutely provable as a legit document, like let's say this was a FOIA document that was released from the government, we would be going nuts. This would blow the roof off of everything if that were true, but we don't have that verification.
what a document by itself doesn't mean much until you can verify it. Inside of lots of intelligence agencies, especially, they will put documents in their files that may be of importance or that maybe somebody inside the department had a question about. And so when you discover it in FOIA, still doesn't necessarily mean it's real, because then you have to do what some researchers have done. You have to go to the people referenced and say, hey, is this real? And if they say no, then you've got a dead end. Now, if Wilson would have said yes, then that would have been a big deal. And you would have then, especially if he said yes, and MJ-12 exists. And I know this for a fact, that would be different. But MJ-12 especially is extremely dubious in its origins. The person who first released this name MJ-12 was Richard Doty, who said he did it in a fake document. And the document is called the Aquarius document, and it's an absolutely ridiculous document. So there's problems with that term. That's an example of something that is in there that is just, hurts the credibility of the document.
Right, but Richard Doty's credibility is somewhat questionable in that regard anyway.
Exactly.
Well, yeah.
I mean, but if you look at this if you see the document that MJ-12 was first referenced in, that it's a ridiculous document. It's just poorly written. It's almost like a kid did it. But at the same time, this is a guy who had only just entered OSI. He was not a very high level person, and supposedly he is given the secrets, the most guarded secrets by the government, and asked to release these to to essentially civilian UFO enthusiasts. I mean, the whole story doesn't make any sense.
Right. What do you feel about Jeremy Corbell's documentary on Bob Lazar?
That's a tough one, too. The tough thing about Bob Lazar, I would admit that he comes across as a credible person. I think he certainly is very intelligent. I know for a fact that, you don't have to necessarily, you definitely aren't going to be a PhD and be a technician. Most technicians are engineers. They're masters degree people, which I don't believe he has, but still they're often very capable people who don't necessarily have a ton of degrees. They just are very intelligent, and he obviously is. However, we have nothing, like absolutely nothing, to support anything he says, and we have one person making these claims. So it's not much substantial there to support anything that he's saying. Throughout the years, we haven't even seen anything that really supports it. There are pieces of information that people believe support his information, but typically they're things that people misunderstand and aren't as big of a deal as people think they are. So it's a tough one. It's one of those, like Stanton Friedman would say, you'd have to put in the gray basket. We just don't know.
I rebroadcast last week an old episode that we did when Stanton was on. And when he spoke about Bob Lazar, he said, look, I believe the guy was there. But in what capacity? Because there's all this other circumstantial evidence that just didn't exist other than his, like you said, his story. But there was support for his being on site, but we just don't know.
Well, there was support for him being on site in Los Alamos, but not at Area 51.
Correct. Yes.
And that is quite a big difference.
That is, but one has to imagine, to be working in a laboratory like that, you have to be smart, correct?
Depending at what capacity. Now, Jeremy really takes issue or a janitor there. That is accurate. That is, he could have been. I don't believe that to be the case. Obviously, this guy is very technically adept. Mm-hmm. He most likely was working for a company that was contracted to work on some sort of project. but we don't know how high level of a technician he was on whatever he was working on, and there are differences. So just because you're working on a project, let's say to build a device using known technology that is maybe at a classified level, doesn't mean you're going to be qualified to work on a black project and cutting edge technology that is top secret. There's a big difference between those as well. Sure. So he obviously, he did work. It seems he worked at Los Alamos. We're not sure at what capacity at this point, but it does lend to that he was knowledgeable, and there's others that can support that he's technically knowledgeable on a lot of different areas. It's tough because you also have a lot of physicists and scientists saying, what he's talking about is gobbledygook and doesn't even really make sense and apply.
I mean, if he's coming from as an outsider into this world, for whatever reason he was chosen to do that, then I can kind of understand that maybe some of what he says is kind of a what did you say? Gobbledygook?
Yep, you got it. That's right. The word I use. I'm not sure if that's really a word, but
because that's how I would feel if I was a little bit outside of my expertise, and I have to try to take on language that may not necessarily make sense to me, and translate that to other people. But we're going to take a phone call now for you, Robin in Salt Lake City. Very good. Welcome for coming on. What's your question for Alejandro?
I've been keeping up with To the Stars Academy and Lou Elizondo and all that business, and I'd just like to ask Alejandro if he's heard if any more videos are coming out, and if so, when?
Supposedly there are more videos. I've heard that. Are they coming out and when? We don't know. So essentially, what the perspective is Lou Elizondo's come out and said, here's what I was in charge of. Here's the information that is mine that I directly work with, and here's what I'm going to share. However, any information, even if it's not classified technically, but it was, under the purview of another department or another agency, I'm not going to release that without the permission of those people who are responsible for that information. In other words, he's not going to upset any of his colleagues. But instead, what they're going to do, what he is talking to those people and saying, look, we've been out now for a couple of years. We've got all of this positive press. This is the time to release information. It's okay now to begin releasing information. And they have made some ground in that arena, for instance, in Washington and with the Navy, releasing information, allowing these active pilots who are, regarding the Roosevelt incident, to be able to talk about their incidents. They have to get permission. If you're an active military, you have to get permission from the Public Affairs Department before you can speak in public about anything. So, and they've granted that permission for them to be on television and everything. So it's been working. I think it's going slower than maybe he thought. I think he was very positive that, hey, my buddies on the inside have a lot of great things to share, and they're going to share them as things go forward. So hopefully they will share them as things go forward. I mean, I think right now we see a very positive response to all of this, and there's no doubt that people are seeing this. Lou has admitted that, at the beginning, there were a lot of his colleagues that were upset with him for sharing all of this information. Sure. But as time has gone on, more and more of them are like, hey, it's not so bad. You're actually getting a lot of serious attention to this topic that we all think is serious, and you're making some headway. So hopefully some of these other areas or people that have videos will begin to share those. I know he's working hard towards that, but I guess it's a wait and see sort of thing.
Sure. Robin, thank you so much for calling in. I appreciate the call. All right, so we have one last question. Alejandro, we're going to squeeze this in at the last from Libertas in Massachusetts. Hey, Libertas, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you? Good evening.
Good. Welcome to Paranormal Now. What's your question for Alejandro?
Well, I don't have a question, but I want to take the opposite position of what I'm hearing about the TTSA. But before I do that, someone that should receive proper credit, and I haven't read nor heard in any interviews any credit, and the credit should go to a gentleman by the name of Steve Atwater from the Federation of American Scientists. He's the only one that I know that got a response back from the DIA per his FOIA request, and he has a listing of all the reports. The DIA also, by the way, made a mistake. They attached a letter to John McCain in the FOIA response, and all, I think it's 36 or 38 of the reports are exposed when 2 of them are still classified. So Atwater should be given a lot more credit. Now, in regards, I've heard some statements about the pilot interviews. Well, one of the pilots that's featured on the new TV show called The Threat, Unidentified, did a television interview long before that show in the New England area because he's from the New England area. Just a point. I take a 180 on the TTSA. I think it's a CIA PSYOPs operation because what do you hear every single show? You hear the threat, the threat, the threat, the threat. So they're trying to change the paradigm from these things have essentially left us alone to their threats. Specific to the TTSA, they're a public corporation. In doing so, they have to do filings with the Security and Exchange Commission. Now, something's rotten in Denmark. Can you hear me okay, Alan?
Yep, go ahead. You're good.
Something's rotten in Denmark. I'll tell you why. They're listing that they're going to expend their funds on beamed energy propulsion, space-time metrics, warp drive metrics. All you have to do is go read the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951, and that is the mechanism used by the United States government. Oh, by the way, worldwide governments to keep their thumb on newer technology, and they're protecting fossil fuels.
Libertas, thank you so much for calling in. I really do appreciate your candor, and I always appreciate your chat room candor and your feedback. I mean, your opinion is valued. Everybody's opinion coming from a different perspective is valued. But we're coming right up at the end of this first hour with Alejandro. So thanks again, Libertas. And Alejandro, do you have a quick response to some of his statements there?
Yeah, just that, we can speculate, but we need proof, I think, for some of these things. And we don't, at least I've been really close. I've interviewed a lot of the people related to this. I've known them for many years, and I don't see that. I don't see the CIA thing. And I understand where people are concerned with the use of the word threat, but Nick Pope for years has told us why that term is so important, especially when it comes to the defense. And so is John Alexander. If you're going to get funding in the Department of Defense, you've got to have a program that is related to a threat. That's their business. Their business is threats, negotiating threats, finding threats, figuring out how to deal with threats. So that's why you see that term threat, because you're not going to get funding if you don't use that term threat. And and if you don't know what it is, technically it is a threat until we know otherwise. So that's why we see that term so much. But I do want to mention real quick, sorry about this, the UFO Congress. George Knapp has been one of the other people, and I do agree with him. His name is Stephen Aftergood with the FAS. But George Knapp has also been someone who's been releasing a lot of information and is releasing more. He'll be speaking at the UFO Congress in September, and you could go to ufocongress.com to register for that. And so you definitely want to hear from George Knapp and what he's going to be sharing. In fact, you can get 10% off at the Congress if you use KGRA as a code when you go to the website.
All right, brilliant. Thanks, Alejandro. And, of course, go to openminds.tv.com to find out more about Alejandro. And do you specifically have any events coming up that you're speaking at?
The UFO Congress, I MC that one, so that's the big one. So, yeah, you can find my radio show at openminds.tv. But definitely go to UFO Congress. I'll be speaking there, and I'll be emceeing that event, and I'll be interviewing a lot of the people there. It's going to be a real good one at ufocongress.com.
All right, brilliant. Thank you so much, Alejandro.
Yes, thank you. It's been great.
All right, have a good night. This is Alan B. Smith. This is the end of our first hour Tonight, coming back on the other side, however, we have Sonia Barrett. She's the author of Holographic Canvas, A Journey of Possibilities, and radio host of The Expansion Zone. And yeah, I think we'll be expanding our minds and spirits tonight. Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now. We will be right back.
No, it's not right. When I come home to you at the end of the day, just to avoid change.
This is Richard Dolan announcing a new exclusive content website, richarddolanmembers.com. I've been working on this for a long time. Unique weekly podcasts that you won't hear anywhere else, fresh articles and blog posts, a special video series entitled Off the Cuff with Richard Dolan, regular Ask Me Anything style live chat sessions, and more. This is a full-featured member site where you will get my insights, my updates, and be able to interact directly with me. To learn more, go to richarddolanmembers.com.
On the next episode of Recipes for Disaster.
So we've got our neighbor Paul coming over tonight for a barbecue, which is why I prepared a delicious lemon rosemary steak marinade from my special collection of old family recipes. To make sure the steaks are extra, extra, extra tender, I left them marinating out on the counter overnight, just like Nana used to.
Maria may mean well, but without food safety, it never ends well. Always thaw or marinate foods in the refrigerator at 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below, or you could make your friends and family really sick. Maria's neighbor Paul didn't think twice about the steak he ate until he was presenting his company's financial forecast to the board. That's when a sudden bout of food poisoning made it explicitly clear that profits weren't the only thing on the rise. Watch Recipes for Disaster at foodsafety.gov. You'll learn the right steps as Maria does everything wrong. Brought to you by the USDA, HHS, and the Ad Council.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Station, Salt Lake City, Utah, Van Buren, Arkansas.
Feeling sluggish, bloated, gassy, and, well, you know, want some relief? Try Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Our unique blend of all natural herbs go to work on your digestive tract, giving you So before you try our super strength formula. It does a great job removing intruders that jack you up. Thousands of people use Life Change Tea every month, so try it because you're gonna love the way you feel. And here's a little pick-me-up. Order now and receive 10% off your first order by entering in 10 today in the coupon code. That's 10 today in the coupon code. Go to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Enter 10 today in the coupon code for your 10% discount. Wow, feeling good never felt so good. Get some tea love at getthetea.com. Changing America one tea bag at a time.
Around the world for decades have come high strangeness reports of mysterious aerial lights, beams, animal mutilations, human abductions, secret space and military programs focused on an alien presence. One reporter of these Earth mysteries is Emmy Award-winning TV producer, writer, and editor Linda Moulton Howe. She reports and edits the science, environment, and real X-Files news website, earthfiles.com.
We are moving from the paradigm that we are alone in the universe to a new one in which we are not alone. And something out there is interacting with us, our animals and plant life, forcing glimpses of other realities upon us.
Linda has produced 4 large books about these phenomena with hundreds of color images and illustrations that reviewers such as New York Times best-selling author Jim Marrs describes as an amazing accumulation of evidence. All her books, An Alien Harvest, the 2-volume Glimpses of Other Realities, and Mysterious Lights and Crop Circles, along with documentaries, are available in the shop at earthfiles.com.
Now you have the inside contact for alternative talk radio. The Planet. KGRAradio.com.
keep on coming, they point to the end, but I hold on so tight. Back and forth in mind, beating conclusions I don't.
And welcome back to Paranormal Now. I'm your host, Alan B. Smith. In the second hour, we have Sonia Barrett, which I'm very excited to talk to for a number of reasons, but I just love talking about the nature of reality and how we ourselves can grow as individuals as we understand the reality that we're living in, and how this is a sort of a feedback loop. And we teach and we learn, and we teach and we learn. Once again, I want to thank Septembrio, septembrio.com, to find out the music for bumper music tonight. They're fantastic people, great music, and I think we ran into Septembrio, I want to say about a year ago via Instagram. And it was just one of those serendipitous connections, and it worked out really well. So thanks again, Michael, for allowing us to use your music tonight. So if you want to ask your questions of Sonia Barrett later in the show, call-ins are now available to all of you as we roll out our new HD toll-free phone line sponsored by the Paranormal Radio app. So add this number to your mobile phone so you can call us hands-free at 85-KGRA-LIVE. That's 855-472-5483. Listen to your cue to call in and pose your questions to the guest or myself. And make sure to save the new Paranormal Radio app hotline number, 85-KGRA-LIVE. Sonia Barrett is the executive producer of the award-winning documentary, The Business of Disease. She is the host and producer of the radio show The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett on KPFK 90.7 FM in Los Angeles. Sonia is known for her cutting-edge insights, with much of it supported by quantum physics. Theoretical physicist Dr. Amit Goswami refers to her as a true mystic. Her work bridges the gap between science and spirituality in a simplified format. She addresses the programming, beliefs, and concepts by which we have lived our lives, both individually and collectively. Sonia, welcome to Paranormal Now.
Well, thank you so much for having me on as a guest.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm hoping that you can enlighten us tonight.
That makes two of us. Hope I can enlighten me.
Isn't that how it works, though?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, this game, this human game, is so profound, and the moment anyone decides to think that they have all the answers, that's a setup. They're really setting themselves up at that point, because it's just vast, and we're constantly digging and discovering new levels of potentialities, new levels of possibilities. And, so I keep that in mind.
Right. I was reading some of your blog posts, and there was one in particular where you were talking about the words that we use in the New Age or spiritual era, right? Things that are trendy, but may not actually hold that much weight. Can you explain to us, why is there a danger in just getting caught up in the trendy terms and terminology?
Well, once again, I'm always completely swinging in the opposite direction of everybody. And I think, one of the things for me is, I know, mindfulness. Everybody talks about mindfulness and some of the more common terminology. But I think what I find is that people tend to jump on the bandwagon of any new trend or theme, and it's just part of how human beings are designed. We are we're habitual creatures. We latch on to patterns very easily, rituals, habits, and a good part of that is because the brain is always looks for patterns. It looks for similar patterns. And so therefore, after a while, anything that becomes repetitious, whether it be in thought or whether it be in action, collectively, individually, that's kind of basically what happens. And so we find that people do that. Now, it tends to remove folks from authenticity, from the individual aspect, as a lot of the group mind is pushed. Mm-hmm. And, a while back, before anybody was talking about that, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to write about this. So what you're talking about is something more recent. But if anybody goes on my site and then they go to a few of Sonia's articles, there's tons of articles that go back to 2001 that I've written. But I did write about the group mind kind of thinking. And so what you're asking me in terms of trends and themes, is there a danger? Well, I don't even know if I can use the word danger. And the reason for that is that I do think that where we are and what we do is completely relevant to the understanding that we hold in that moment. Now, the key is to be open enough so that new concepts and ideas and realizations are free to flow in, so that one can then become aware, perhaps, of being caught in the same old, or in a collective thought process or pattern or theme, or any of that. And the group mind is, it pretty much kind of makes us, like a Borg mind. And I know we are one, which is how people tend to get lost into the group mind concept, because that aspect gets pushed. Sure, we are one, but at the same time, there's a reason why we show up and appear to be individuals. There's a reason for that. And we are individuals in the sense of this new, very unique representation. This is what we represent, a unique representation of that which cannot be defined, that which we may call source. The individual has to be unique in order to represent and experience unlimited possibilities. So when we lock ourselves in to the same kind of thinking and behavior, themes and trends, we do shut down our perception. We don't allow our perception to have the kind of latitude, the kind of stretch that would allow us to be even way more outside of the box. And so that's a big reason why people need to really examine just how attached are they to that sort of group mind thinking. And we see this in religion, and we see this in all kinds of organizations that have a cliquey, approach to it, cults. It's cliquey
as in what, like catchy, or?
Well, meaning when I say cliquey, I know I use that word, but cliquey meaning that
like in high school cliquey.
Yeah, that everybody sort of hovers around that one very familiar thought process, belief. And you can't waver outside of that. You don't waver outside of that. That's what we probably look at as a cult. But then that's religion, and that's a whole lot of other kind of group organized thinking. And
so there's a parallel then between what you're saying in terms of these larger groups and words like mindfulness, abundance, prosperity, the law of attraction.
Mm-hmm. Those are all very trendy. And people have gotten very lost in these concepts. Mm-hmm. And, we've heard from people who, even with The Secret, where they, it was like anything you want, you can, this is how you get anything you want, money, so on and so forth. Not that there's anything right or wrong about doing that. But what some people found is that it actually affected them because their focus really became more on either just the material or attracting things that they thought they wanted, but it was all based on these deep-rooted belief systems, beliefs and concepts about themselves, things in their subconscious mind. That was basically what was more the desire, pulling that kind of desire to them, or pulling them towards that kind of desire. So it is about really being able to stop and to observe oneself and to see exactly where is this thought process coming from? How authentic am I? My question was, how do I know I like this color red because I like this color red? And that was like a big question to me. Like, how do I know that? And then I started to realize just how much of what we understand or how we operate in reality is based on reality being sold to us all the time. Is there a concept that is being sold to us day in and day out, and you don't notice it because it's your normal. It becomes your normal.
I'm sure you probably agree with me that it's funny how we can recognize these things and yet behave in the same way. And one of the things that you had written on this particular blog post, one of the trendy words are you vegan?
Oh my gosh.
And I think that is funny, because when I first became a vegetarian in the late 90s, people looked at me like I had 5 heads.
Yeah.
And like,
yeah.
Some family members and friends like, well, what about chicken? Can you?
Yeah. But you're leaving the group mind thing. Right. You're leaving, and that's.
But then people go to the other extreme, become vegan.
Oh yeah.
And then turn around and say, well, what's wrong with you? Why can't you? Yeah.
It becomes upsetting. I'm hearing an echo. I'm hoping the echo isn't coming through, but it becomes upsetting. Just like religion. This is why some of the groups go door to door, because the more people that are invested in a particular belief system, the easier it is to remain in that belief system. No different than with the diet. We're used to, eating a certain way. Everybody, at least in people's minds anyway, this is the ideal way for you to eat, whether it be vegan or vegetarian or a meat eater or whatever. And so it all just becomes just another trend. Now, what's attached to the trend? What becomes attached to the trend is this some sort of superiority complex that that people end up having. It's like, oh, you eat meat? Oh, you're not a vegan? Oh, or I'm vegetarian. And I can say these things because when I remember when I was vegetarian, I didn't think that I had this superior thing going on. But then I look back and I thought, wow, yeah, you kind of did. When you would go someplace and the first thing they go, oh no, she can't eat that, she's vegetarian. So suddenly you're elevated without realizing that's what happens. Suddenly you stand out and now you're up here. But the other folks, they prefer that there's more people that are on the same idea, same concept, because it causes people to question what they believe. And I think it's the same thing with what you're saying with veganism or vegetarianism. The reason why people elevate like that, like suddenly they're superior, is because you'd have to have something there to make you okay about this new club that you have joined. You belong to this new club now. It's all gluten-free, or it's all this, or it's all that. And I'm not saying people shouldn't do that, but I'm just looking at how people jump on the bandwagon, and suddenly everybody else who's not part of that little clique, that's what I mean by clique, by that little group, is looked at as strange.
Well, as a New Yorker, I have to say, I'm a little upset that we didn't have all the food vegetarian festivals, through the early 2000s, and now you have like 100 vegan pop-ups and festivals. And like, hey, y'all skip the vegetarian thing. Why don't we get
yeah. Because veganism knocked the vegetarian thing out of the.
We're not special anymore.
You're not special, and and vegetarian, being a vegetarian. That didn't have the same level of elevation. It didn't have the same level as being a vegan.
Yeah, but we took the hits for the vegans.
Yeah, exactly. You were the what do they call it? Way shower.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were the way shower. But yeah, I was a vegetarian for a long time, so I totally get it. But I think it's just looking at the manner in which we operate. And some people, they may get upset with me when I say things like that about mindfulness. And I would say, God, if one more person says that to me, be mindful. And the reason why I'm saying this is, Alan, is because the core meaning of a lot of these things get completely lost, like yoga. It all gets lost. The core deep meaning is gone, and then it just becomes a trend.
It becomes surface level.
Exactly. It becomes surface level. It becomes, very commercial. It's the thing to do. You see commercials now where, who advertises tires by a yoga pose? Come on. What does that even mean?
Well, I don't think that Lululemon's a sponsor of ours. So I think it's fair for me to say that Lululemon is like the perfect idea of that culture that you're talking about, right? Like,
yeah,
have your Lululemon label. That means, Lululemon, they must be doing yoga. They must, there's a certain lifestyle you are subscribing to.
Absolutely. You're up there. You're in that group, and you want to appear in that group.
With the cool kids. Yeah.
That's right. With the cool kids. And Lululemon is pricey, so it's not like you going to Target and buying those pants. It's not going to be the same when you do yoga.
But there's no doubt that yoga is healthy for your body, though. And it has to be good for your mind nonetheless, right?
It is. That's the whole thing. It's a very profound tool. I mean, that's ancient. But I think a lot of people miss out on what it really means, even though they're benefiting, but they miss out. Why? Because people don't want to go that deep. It's the truth. There's so much work involved. Going very deep means some serious, deep work on yourself. And people run away from really working on themselves that deeply. And so when you're able to do more surfacey spiritual things or more surfacey, things for your mind, it's a little bit more surfacey. You feel good because you're doing something. It's like going to church on Sundays. I go to church every Sunday, so I feel like I'm doing something for the rest of the week. So it's the way human beings, we're designed to some degree, but it's also a part of a program that we've all sort of, got tied into. We're networked into a certain kind of thinking and a certain kind of belief that really distracts us. It completely distracts us from seeing behind the veil more deeply.
Right. And speaking of behind the veil, as I had mentioned to you off-air in comments, that my wife and I revisited The Matrix recently.
Oh, you read the Matrix itself? Because
or
the movie. Well, you're already in it.
Well, that's personal. But but there's a saying right in there that for humankind, hope is simultaneously our greatest strength and also our greatest weakness. But I would also like to get your thought on, don't you think purpose is the same thing, that it's also our strength and weakness, a sense of purpose?
Yeah, that's another thing I talk about, is the idea of purpose, because so many people do get lost in, that. And a lot of the new age stuff is, workshops and finding your purpose, finding your real self, and purpose to me is anything that I've ever done, anything I'm doing right now, anything that I'm going to do in the future. That is my core purpose. Now, we can, however, continue to make evolution to that purpose, to those things that we've done. We can incorporate new passions and new ideas, but to toss out to say, well, let me find my real purpose, is to disqualify our lives. It's to disqualify everything that came before, that statement. And so people end up in this massive search for this one thing that they're going to lock their minds into as their purpose. when your whole existence is your purpose. You're here on this journey to explore, to discover, to experience, to imagine. And that's what we've been doing. It doesn't matter. I always say the guy pushing the shopping cart down the street. In that moment, that is what he is doing. That is his purpose in that moment, maybe to us, based on our social and collective protocols, that it doesn't qualify. It's like he's wasting his life. No life is wasted. There's no life that is wasted.
Yeah.
However, there is discovery. There is the sense of deeper discovery and allowing one's perception to widen so that the belief systems that we have aren't so small and so locked in. Because what do we have, Alan? All we have are possibilities. And we are an ocean of potentials. That's what we exist in. So to lock oneself in, to try to lock yourself into one meaning and one purpose, no, your life is to be lived and to explore. And whatever your passion is in this moment, then you ride the wave of that passion and not be afraid to experience. Now, I must say this, that sometimes what happens is the idea of being in this constant search for purpose, it can become a distraction and a way of hiding from actually seeing one's life and from actually exploring some of the things that deep down we would like to, but we're afraid. So it's so much easier to hide behind searching for this thing that for some people will never show up, even though it does, because it's their whole life. So their purpose is to, go in search of their purpose.
Well, that's interesting you said that, because I was just going to ask you, when we are really down and out, and we just can't seem to see a light, and we're feeling terrible about the existence of ourselves, of life, purpose can get us out of those slumps, right? But then that same purpose could also be radicalized. So to me, that tells me the purpose itself doesn't necessarily solve the underlying problem.
It can be a temporary fix. And let's face it, everybody gets exactly what they need in the moment. It doesn't matter how crazy it seems, but in that moment, if one needed to suddenly get a spark, that this is my purpose, and it pulls you out of a state of depression, then that was exactly the perception that one needed to have in that moment. Now, I think what we must keep in mind is the fact that we want to continue to expand on those possibilities instead of just locking it in. I often talk about the fact that the brain, once again, the brain looks for patterns. And also we want to keep creating new neural pathways. And the way that we do that is to learn and to explore, learn new things. And learning new things is about exploring and using our imagination and all of those things. So they even show this with seniors, that when people who we define as older or reach a particular number of cycles, as I like to state it, and they are learning new things or doing new things, that it actually impacts their longevity. They actually are generally healthier and they live longer. Why? Because there's new neural pathways, and there is this idea, your brain has the information that we're not done yet. We're not done yet. We're going to explore more. There's more. And that also affects the cells. It affects the whole body, instead of just thinking, okay, well, I'm retired, or, well, I've got a few years left, or, whatever the thought process is. But if we can open it up and realize that there's more, and what I'm talking about with seniors and learning new things, that's on a tiny, tiny scale. What I'm speaking of in terms of exploring new things is on a much bigger scale. And on that scale, we're talking digging in and wanting to see more, once again, of what is behind this what appears to be veil, seeing behind it, seeing beyond, I should say, seeing beyond it, and giving your brain and your whole being permission to explore beyond the construct that we have become attached to, the construct of reality, the idea, the blueprint that we've become attached to.
Yeah, and I'd definitely like to talk about that. And for anyone tuning in right now, I'm speaking with Sonia Barrett. You can find out more information, therealsoniabarrett.com, and you can go down her blog rabbit hole like I did. I came across Sonia on the virtual interwebs and was fascinated with some of the things that she's discussed. And one of those things is, what is the fabric of the universe, and how do we relate to that? So Sonia, what is behind the veil, behind what we can see right now with our eyes?
What is I love when I get like questions that it's like the meaning of life.
Yes, we want to give us all the answers.
10 seconds. Yes, I know all. I am the all-seeing eye. Wow, you said what is behind? Well, here's the thing. When we say what's behind all of this, when I say that, what I'm looking at is the manner in which the brain filters reality, right? So everything is there. Everything is accessible. That's the first thing that we need to take ownership and realization of, that everything is there. There's really nothing covered. However, based on our perception, based on this, the blueprint that we hold in place of what we think reality is, what we will allow reality to be, how we will allow it to show itself to us, what we believe it cannot be, we are really trapped inside of those kinds of belief systems and perceptions. And so our brain filters, according to the thought process of the mind and everything I've just said, it filters what we will allow, or what we can accept as a possibility. So this is why we don't really see, well, some people see a bit further than other people, but that's all that it is. It's that filter keeps coming off based on the expansion of our perception, what we can accept as a possibility. And the easiest way to do that is to keep realizing that reality, you can attempt to put a lid on it, but that's just an illusion. You can't confine reality to one perception of how it is. And I hear people do that. Well, that's not possible. I mean, even scientists will do that. Well, that's not possible because it can't be quantified by the scientist or that person. There's nothing verifiable, sure, because of the field that you're operating in. We can only see according to the field that we are in. And I think, to me, it's so simple. So therefore, to own that, to realize that, okay, the only reason why I can only see what I'm seeing is because of the belief system and the field that I'm operating in. But if I'm giving myself permission to see more and to realize that there are no limits on what reality is, what it can be, what it has been, to realize that is to begin the process of allowing ourselves to gradually be able to see more in small bites. We're not saying you're going to see everything at once. And why don't we see everything at once? We must remember that what we've been operating by is one heck of a series of programs, meaning a set of prescribed belief systems, programming, like you program a computer. And that's a part of, down to our DNA. It's part of us. So we're talking however many years, the human beings have been functioning here in terms of when we, moved into a more what we would call a declining state in terms of our memory and in terms of what we see as possibilities, we have to realize that we are in a way breaking through layers and layers of programs that human beings operate by on a collective level and, of course, on an individual level. Right. That's a blueprint that you're operating by.
Yeah, but that's a lot to take in, what you just said.
I know.
No, and I think that's why so many people are deterred. I mean, I would say no matter how hard most people try to be either better people, to find some contentment in their life, so many people have to deal with financial burdens that go for not just weeks or months, but
their whole life sometimes.
Right. And, how do you...
Those are all programs.
Well, right. But when you're there...
You're there. I get it. I've been there.
You put your head down and you say to yourself, you know what? When I finally can, I'll be able to pull out, get some fresh air, get some perspective. But you can't because you're just surviving.
No, it's a setup loop, because the more you think that, okay, well, once this happens, then I'm going to do this thing. Guess what? All that happens is you keep going. Once this happens, then I'm going to dig in more. Once I get clear, and then that just becomes a loop. And the fact that you're running the same program of whatever that life is over and over and over. And I get it, how difficult that is, because when you're in it, you are in it. And so you have a personal blueprint, right, of what you as an individual, what your reality looks like. And that's what you keep running over and over. And what did I say earlier? The brain looks for patterns. So there's a pattern of either being in poverty, a pattern of like once upon a time in my life, I ran a pattern of always having a problem paying my rent. When I was raising my kids, I get it paid, but it was always, no matter what, it's like, oh my God, rent time, here I go. And it was a pattern. And I'm saying that to people to let them realize that everything we do is a pattern, and our brain just simply looks for the same pattern, and it just loops over and over till you realize you're running it's a pattern. Now,
so you have to create your own pattern? Is that
you have to, well, you come into realization, and yes, and then you start looking at that. And if you start taking notice of what happens leading up to that same experience. Okay, well, let's go with red. What is it that happens when I get my check that perpetuates, that ensures that this will happen? What is the behavior that happens with me that is routine, that is my normal, that has become my normal, so I don't notice it? Instead, I think that, oh my God, this always happens to me. No, you have to stop and you have to see. Then you have to intercept the program somehow. You have to do something different. And sometimes you have to take yourself up to the very edge where it looks like you're going to fall, but you don't fall. So there's so much more here, but that's the formula, is to intercept that loop somehow, as opposed to going, well, I don't know, I keep trying and nothing works. When you say I keep trying and nothing works, you know what happens? Your brain hears, oh, we're supposed to keep doing this because nothing works. That's an instruction. It is a criminal game. I always say it's just criminal. But
it is, yeah.
Yeah, that's an instruction. So, of course, nothing can work because that is the law. That's you've created your own personal law. And like I said, I totally get it, because I have lived through some very challenging times in my life, and I didn't understand this then, but there's some things that I gradually started to understand about my finances in particular back then. And I thought, okay, this is what you always do. Okay, so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to not do that. No matter what it looks like, even if I ended up without lights, this is what we're going to do. And I would write it out and it looks scary, but guess what? It wouldn't happen. It would shift. But most people, they get close, and then what do? We reach back into our past or our history of solutions, and then we end up using the same solutions because it's familiar.
Reasons. Sure.
Yeah. So you keep going back there.
Do you think that if one gets a glimpse of what reality actually is, that sort of vision, maybe it's you can make a parallel between seeing the white light, as it were. Is that enough to kind of shake you up?
No. I think that what it does is that people will go, oh, wow, it was amazing. And then what happens? Because it is has not become anything permanent in that blueprint, that the same repetitious stuff they've been doing for 20 years or however long they've been doing it, that they just the brain boomerangs back to the pattern. It boomerangs back to the normal. And so here we go again. And so what I say to folks is this: if you were to look into your life and take an honest look, there have been some moments that you would have considered miraculous where you had no idea how things were going to work out. But then you kind of just gave up because you didn't know what else to do. And then out of nowhere, it worked out. So what you start doing is you start stockpiling, or you start grabbing onto those memories of the times when you have just managed to surrender and to trust something greater than yourself. You start holding on to that and reminding yourself, you know what? Okay, but yes, things did work out. Yes. And you have to keep building yourself up to this becoming your normal. That's what everything comes down to, is it's being able to move yourself into a space where, like a habit, because that's all it is. It's all, a program is a habit. It's all, that's the same thing, same formula. So you start getting your brain, your mind to realize that this is a normal way that we're going to operate, as opposed to the other way that we've been operating. And you have to hold out to keep holding to that for long enough for it to take set.
What are we operating on? What is this matrix or hologram that you refer to?
What are we operating on?
Yeah. What is that system? Is it? I know in quantum physics you break it down to the smallest particles of waves, but what does that mean? Are we actually in, a meta version of a software program?
Yes, because most people don't look at it that reality is a massive technology. Because immediately when we use the word technology, we look at, our computers and maybe rolled up robots and AI and all that stuff now. But we don't like to associate ourselves with that idea or the bigger picture that everything in the tiny, in the small here is replicating a much bigger system, and so on and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. That's technology. So we're dealing with an incredible technology. The next part of this that we must realize is that the body, you are, as everybody says, you're not your body. Okay, but we say that intellectually. Mm-hmm. The body is an incredible piece of technology. It is a sensory system. It is so important that we really start to realize that it's a sensory system, meaning that its job is to process emotions, feelings, electrochemical impulses. Its job is to process the experiences of this reality, meaning that whatever we are, that outside of these bodies that cannot experience this reality according to the laws of this reality, according to the gaseous laws and so on of this reality. Mm-hmm. But in these bodies that are designed to be able to experience life here and for us to have our relationships and connections with people and things and places, this body does that. Okay. And so that is important because we tend to reduce ourselves when we talk about, who's struggling, what's going on with ourselves, we reduce ourselves to our body as opposed to realizing that we are much bigger than that. But the body is a technology that's belongs to us, that more expansive part of us that's used for this reality. And there was something else I was going to tell you about the technology, a question based on the question that you had asked me. You said, is this a technology or a system?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, yeah, and there was something else I wanted to say about that. But yes, so here's what I wanted to say. The one beautiful thing about Vipassana meditation and tools, ancient tools like that, that really can take a person into feeling the subatomic particles of which this body is made. Mm-hmm. I think that's really important for people to really understand. Okay, so the body, we know that the body is made of subatomic particles, but what we need to realize is that the subatomic particles just contain data. It contains information. It contains the information that we subscribe to in our personal reality. So go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, okay. And so therefore, when we say, gosh, your life is not changing, it's the same thing over and over, that's because of the loop that I talked about. So even though we are being renewed, like I say, the body is really always regenerating itself, what's happening is the subatomic particles, which are always changing, subatomic particles just keep carrying the same information, even though they're new. It's the same information that keeps forming you, that keeps shaping this vehicle, which is a sensory system. And so that's really important to understand the level at which those kinds of limiting beliefs and the stuck on the pattern and the belief system, how all of that is actually forming your body. Your whole body is made of that. We can see somebody coming back from vacation and we go, oh my God, you look so different, so fresh. Okay, because the weight has been taken off of that person. That person has had a chance to step away, which means that the patterns and the conversations going on in that person's head for a moment, for a week or maybe two, depending on how long they're on vacation, shut off, and now they were focused on something else, something light, something fun. Mm-hmm. So now that wasn't running. But then once we come back in our regular reality, then we are reminded, and then we start the subatomic particles begin to be constructed of that data once again, and then that person starts looking aged again.
Well, I would argue anytime you go on vacation, similar to meditation, you get ideas that you didn't have before. You maybe get a little bit of perspective that you didn't have before, but you're right. You jump right back in the game, and then you go back to those old habits. If you would like the answers to all of existence, ask Sonia Barrett at 85 KGRA Live. That's 855-472-5483. But
gosh.
It's all on you tonight, Sonia.
That is too funny.
When I first saw the Matrix, the movie, right? I mean, that blew my mind. Mm-hmm. It's hard to make an equivalent between that and Star Wars, because when I was a kid, the first Star Wars movie blew my mind, right? But as getting closer to adulthood, when I saw the Matrix, it just made sense. It rang true. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you this: mm-hmm. when we first see works of art like the Mona Lisa mm-hmm. or the Last Supper, we don't know why when we see it, but it connects.
It triggers, right?
It triggers, and there's something subconscious going on there.
There's a truth.
There's a truth there, right? Now, here's the thing. Now, that's beautiful art that someone put their heart, soul, and thoughtfulness into it, right? Mm-hmm. However, when you see, I remember when I first saw graphics that depicted how neurons interact in our brain. It's usually like a blue or purplish color, right? With like mm-hmm. lights, electricity flickering before. Mm-hmm. That also resonated. Mm-hmm. And there may not have been any special intent behind that, just other than to express our physicality. But I think those types of graphics,
everything's encoded though. So
there you go. And so what is it? Why is that so attractive?
Because art is really this is the reason why art was so looked upon or revered once upon a time, and the architects and the engineers, they were artists, really. It's because art carries profound information in it. The artist can paint something that topically looks amazing, but where a true artist goes to download that information and to capture it on canvas, what they capture and what we see is an image, but there is a lot of information that comes with that image that we don't see, which is why we have logos, which means art. But what do we use for our business? You get a logo. Your logo is supposed to be symbolic and carry the core essence of what your business is, which is why some companies pay so much to get a logo designed, because inside that logo is the information, without it being said, of what that company represents. Okay, well, so it is with art. And so symbols were our first language. Well, art is a symbol. I mean, everything is art around us. So we start realizing that. So this is the reason why we so easily engage, because our first language is really symbols. It's not the talking, speaking through our mouth. So our brains are connecting much more deeply with what is seen and decoding it, even though we aren't able to decode it into language, but the brain is picking up more of what we don't see on this smaller level. And so anyway, so that's a big part of it. And of course, I'm always going somewhere else with it, and then I veer off to another place. But yes, that's very, very important that we understand how much of this is encoded, and how much information is actually being processed by our minds all day long. Everything is made up of streams of information. And what was the question you had asked me again before that? So I'm trying to get back to that.
Well, no, I actually want to touch on something that you just said about logos, which if you look up the word logos, it means the word of God, the principle of divine reason and creative order. So that's quite the order to put on a word, right?
Right. And so it means art. It also means art. Is it from Greek, I think, which is part of the word technology. Techno also means art, logos. Those words, they're supposed to technically be the same. When you start researching it, they are. So you've got the knowledge, technology, the knowledge of art, or what did you just say it means?
Word of God.
Word of God. So the knowledge, see how that is? Technology.
Yeah.
The word, the knowledge of God. Knowledge of, even if we don't use the word God, knowledge of, because it's so big, that's all it is. The knowledge of. Does that make sense? The knowledge of. And yes, it's very profound. You start really looking at it. So people need to understand a much deeper understanding about this idea of technology, and just open our minds to something much bigger. This is profound.
How deep have you gone down the rabbit hole? When I meditate, all I get to is a place of clearing the mind. Thoughts come and go, and I get into it as still as a place as I can, and inevitably I gain from that in some one way or the other, right? But I don't get to that level where I can see the nature of reality like the Buddha did.
Right.
How far have you seen?
Well, it's, for me, I don't even know if it's how far I've seen, because I see all the time. Like I never don't see. I don't know. That it sounds a little odd, but I mean, it's like everything is just there. And let me say this, that what happened for me, just real quickly for your listeners who have never heard of me before, what happened for me was back in 1992, I just left my marriage, I was going through a divorce. I had gone through a very tough, horrific 14 years of being in that experience, and I'd left with 2 children. And I really wanted to understand what was this thing we call life. I just really needed to know. I needed to go beyond the books. I need to go beyond anything that I was ever told. And I had a church. I came from the church as a child. I grew up in the church. And then I read a couple books. I read Shirley MacLaine's Out on a Limb at the time and Dancing in the Light. And it made me realize, there's people thinking, asking questions. And I read Masters of the Far East. And then I read the Bible again a little bit, went through it, marked it all up. And then I just took everything and set it aside. And then I decided to attempt to do this thing that I had no knowledge of what to do, which was called meditation. No knowledge. One day, after trying to do this thing, I had an incredible breakthrough that made me just see beyond this idea of reality and this whole feeling. So I became like a child in a candy store, and every day, several times a day, I would go back to try to master this experience, to tap in. Well, I went from there to a level of being able to just have a question or feel like I'm going to know some information. I'd go lay down and I'd go in this in-between state. It wasn't asleep, but right in this in-between state. And so over time, I developed a trust in the information that I was starting to write down, because I had no knowledge of quantum physics or the idea of metaphysics. I just came to the table raw. Right. And I just developed a trust, and for 10 years straight, from 1992 to on, I'm not even sure what year, but I know it was like at least 10 straight years of mastering doing this, to the point where I didn't need to meditate necessarily like that anymore. I'm just awake, and I can think of anything at any time.
Yeah, we are at the end. I have to tell you that this hour went by extraordinarily fast, and I really wish we had a couple of hours together instead, because I've really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
Oh, absolutely. So if you can leave us with a brevity of words of wisdom, what would it be?
It's to be curious, and to just be curious, and to thine own self be true, meaning to see the truth of who you are, not for blame or shame or any of that, but just to see the truth of who you are and what you've been, and own it. And that's the beginning, and then give yourself permission to know more.
Okay, Sonia, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed tonight.
Thank you.
All right, to find out more about Sonia Barrett, go to SoniaBarrettSpeaker.com. And you can also tune into the Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett, KPFK 90.7 FM in Los Angeles. You've been listening to Paranormal Now, broadcasting live on KGRA, Tuesdays 8 to 10 p.m. EST. KGRA, your official contact for the best in alternative talk radio. And join us next week, again, Tuesday at 8, for Christopher O'Brien, and we will be talking about cryptozoology, the paranormal, and a multitude of ufological investigations. So that's going to be a fun night. Now stay tuned for Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, and special thanks to KGRA producer Bill Skywatcher, and of course, Ray Hobbs. And until next time, live in the mystery.